What is energy healing? Energy healing is founded on two fundamental principles. The first one is that outer depends on inner. And that's a principle from the science of creative intelligence. Outer depends on inner. That means that inside, the foundation is laid for the outer expressions of creation. The second principle is that we have control over that filter or the field of consciousness within that sits between the unbounded eternal source of creation and whatever shows up at the surface. So you've got outer depends on inner. So what shows up at the surface is dependent on this whole field, not just the source of creation itself, but the whole field of subtle strata of consciousness that lies between the surface and the source. And then we have control over that filter. We have control over that subtle strata area. Oh, well, I can see I've got this like shadow from this. Don't mind me. Anyway, yes, so that subtle strata of creation. No, I like it because you've got the light coming on one side, you've got the dark on the other, and that's really how that subtle field is constructed. It's how the landscape lays out. So maybe just as well, right? Perfect. Yeah. Okay. So energy healing is based on this premise that all we really need to do is master our understanding and facility, working with the inner field, that sort of filter part, the filtering part of the structure of consciousness. And by doing that, then we have some autonomous control over what shows up at the surface. I have great respect for Western medicine. So, of course, if a person falls ill, I'm not going to say, oh, don't go get a medication or have a procedure done. No, it's fine. It's good to do those things too, but it's really good if you want those material means of dealing or coping with problems or illnesses, if you want them to be effective, then it's important to also understand how consciousness causes the field of your consciousness. And when I say that, I mean from the grosser down to the subtler level, how that affects the way the physical body shows up. Because as we all know, there are 2, 3, 4, a dozen people can take the same medication and they get different effects, right? Some medical procedures go according to the book, and then others, they're like issues that arise and they don't go according to the book and problems crop up. So how does, what can we do from our side to create a context in which the healing modalities that we pursue will have the maximum possible effect, positive effect on our health, essentially? Anyway, that's the goal. That's the goal of energy healing, is to work from the inside out, to work with consciousness. When you get to be comfortable enough and technically adept enough, then the medical procedures and all that become less necessary. A lot of issues and problems that can be handled with medications and with surgeries and so forth, they can eventually, you can handle them with consciousness alone. And better yet, the problems don't crop up in the first place because you're already handling the consciousness. The outer depends on inner, right? So really, ultimately, what the aim of energy healing is to do less and accomplish more, right? Is to work with the inner strata of the field of consciousness in such a way that the problem doesn't crop up in the first place. That's the goal. Okay. On that note, let's take 3 minutes and enjoy the silence of being, which is the source of all healing. It's the source of all evolution. And I'll just ask you to close your eyes, and I'll be muting myself and putting my clock up here, but ask you to close the eyes. And after 3 minutes, I'll ask you to open the eyes. And when we go to open the eyes, let's just take a little bit of time, no rush, no rush popping out of that silence, but the taking a little bit of time helps to integrate the silence. And integration is another fundamental principle of energy healing. That what we're really doing in energy healing is we're integrating the 100% fully life supporting absolute field of bliss, of divine light, of divine grace into the physiology. That's really what we're doing, integrating. It's one thing to experience it, it's another to integrate it with the physiology. And healing is all about integration. So take your time. I'm now going to ask everyone to close the eyes. Let's close our eyes. We'll just take 3 minutes. All right. Let's take a minute and then slowly open the eyes. Energy healing and the immune. Oh, wait, the prayer of gratitude. Sorry, I almost forgot. Thank you to the source of creation for being everything, for being all of us, and for being the whole universe. Thank you for being that channel of wisdom that connects the absolute, unmanifest source of creation with the whole manifest field of creation. Thank you for our webinar hour, that we may use it in the most valuable and efficient and powerful way for everybody here. Always the intention is to go to the source of creation, to the seed or the source of the illness as well. Always the source of creation, but also to the seed or source of the illness, and address that illness from its seed, from its origins. Thank you, everyone, for being here and for the opportunity to be of service. I really love to be of service. I enjoy serving. So thank you for making that possible for me. I appreciate it. All right. The nervous system. No, the immune system. The immune system. Okay. So I'm not a doctor. First, the disclaimer, I'm not a doctor, a medical doctor, and I don't really approach this issue from a very medical position or standpoint. I'm looking at the energy of the immune system. I'm looking in, using my awareness from the surface of creation down to the finer, more delicate, more abstract levels of creation, to see how the immune system shows up energetically, and to help describe for everyone what that landscape looks like, so that you can navigate it with better facility. A lot of times if we get sick, and say you get sick and you go to the doctor and the doctor says, oh, well, you have an autoimmune disease, that's nice to know. It's nice to know what it is that you have, so that you can, that some course of therapy can be imparted. But the problem is that the doctors, many, many years of training and practice, doesn't really allow for you to understand in depth the way the doctor understands what's going on with your immune system. And the doctor's not going to really try to explain it at the level of depth at which they understand it. But what the patient has on their side is the level of direct experience, the value of direct experience. So the immune system, and I just have basic understanding, but the immune system, as I understand it, is overseen by or administrated by the thymus, which is a gland, which sits right at this point in the chest where the ribs bow out a little bit, right? There's a little bow right there. So that's going to be the location of the thymus, just under that bow, about where my little pendant is there. And it's absolutely one of the great ways that we get our attention focused into the area of the body that needs support is to bring the hands into that area, because the chakras in the palms of the hands allow awareness to focus more concisely than if we're just kind of randomly, oh, I'm focusing my awareness here or here or here. Notice even when I say it, I bring my hands up, right? So we can focus the awareness here and here. But if we put the hands, especially if it's the body, right? The hands are very good at kind of bringing awareness back into the physical form. So we can bring the awareness right here into the center, right over the thymus. And just take a moment and just say hello to the thymus. If you feel like it, you can join me or not. It doesn't matter. I love you. I'm just glad you're here. The thymus, which oversees, there's a certain number of immune system cells that are created in the thymus. Also, quite a lot of immune system cells are created in the bones. And quite a lot are stored in the spleen, in the bones and in the spleen. But what takes place, I understand, what takes place in the thymus is a kind of training for the immune system cells. And there's a culling that takes place as well, that the thymus has the capacity to review the condition, the health, the well-being of the immune system cells, and then decide, is this one strong enough to go out and do an efficient job in my body, or is this one too overly zealous to allow to go out there and overreact, something like that. So some culling is required, which means discrimination is required. So what is one of the great skills or abilities? One of the great qualities of the thymus is discrimination. Now that's no surprise, because the entire chest area is known as the Hridaya Mahamarma. Hridaya means heart, right? So, and Mahamarma means big, like a big giant chakra. We have like a big giant chakra in our head. We've got another big one in the heart chest area, and we've got another one in the gut area. So three big main energy centers there. The Hridaya Mahamarma, or this big chest area energy center, is a center of wisdom for the body. In the story of the hero's journey, our body represents different phases or aspects or features along the path of the hero's journey. The hero's journey is this archetypal story that's been with us as humans since possibly before we were even humans. I don't know, it goes way back. It goes way back to, pre-writing and very, very, very far back. It's an oral tradition in our world. And the reason that story is so important, and as an archetypal representation of the way in which the source of creation evolves through the human condition. It's an important story. And the reason I bring it up is because each part of the body represents a different area or part of that story. And that by placing a specific part of the body within the context of that story, we understand what that part of the body represents. And of course, falling ill is the way the body communicates to the inner indweller of the body, right? Falling ill communicates to us as the indweller what is the precise area of the physiology, or what is the precise area of one's own hero's journey, one's own evolutionary process that is ripe for evolution at this time, is ripe for transformation at this time. There's so much in that. Number one, if you jump on the evolutionary process, if you jump on the evolutionary train and go, okay, like, I get it. I'm supposed to be evolving here. So let me just do my evolution thing, like really lean into it. Then what that does is it keeps you a little bit of a jump ahead a lot of times of illnesses. Illnesses are less likely to crop up if the individual is dedicating themselves to the evolutionary process. Another point in that, another observation there, is that they're kind of like two camps. One camp aims toward comfort and short-term pleasures, and the other camp leans toward long-term fulfillment. And the universe is set up to favor long-term fulfillment and evolution, sustainable. The universe is set up, the universe has a sort of the source of creation as it goes through its evolutionary cycle with us as part of the instrument of that process that is aimed toward, that journey, that hero's journey is aimed toward evolution. It's not aimed toward comfort. If anybody knows the hero's journey story, the archetype, you find out, well, there's not so much comfortable. I mean, it starts out right from the beginning, right? The hero gets kicked out of his comfy home and all of a sudden out and has to be watchful of every little detail. And it just goes from there to eventually having to face his greatest fears, right? So the evolutionary cycle has been understood through the human condition as being not really the most comfortable thing, but absolutely that which leads to long-term fulfillment. The point I'd like to make about this is that my most recent thinking on the topic is that there are things that fulfill both. And the natural tendency of a human being to kind of favor comfort or short-term pleasures is that quality of us is actually charming. As human beings, I think it's one of the things that makes human beings really charming. It's what allows us to appreciate beautiful music and art, right? It allows us to, it drives us to enjoy humor. It's one of the qualities that makes life meaningful. If life is meaningful in the short term, then we tend to orient toward things like becoming householders and perpetuating the race, right? Or if you're not interested in the sort of short-term, more ephemeral pleasures, one doesn't go in that direction. One is like, well, I just want to get enlightened. I'm going to go sit in a cave and just get enlightened. Fine, forget the rest of the world. I don't care, something like that. So and we're wired. We are wired to, we've got these neurochemical makeup and pathways in our brain that kick in when we eat delicious food or have or someone tells a funny joke or whatever. So I don't think that the story is that, oh, well, we should just be like monks, very austere and fasting all the time and just only aim toward the evolutionary process and sort of renounce the rest of the world. I don't think we would survive if we did that. And also the source of creation that needs humanity as part of its evolutionary process would not enjoy the bliss of the material world without us enjoying the bliss of the material world. So both are necessary. And one of the first things I told you about was hands over the middle of the chest area, is because I found that that's a thing that brings me personally tremendous comfort. When I put the hands here like this, I feel my own love. I feel a sweetness in the chest area. It's actually produced by the tissues and the functions of the chest area. Yeah, it's like this sweet thing. And it has this kind of short-term, ephemeral pleasure sort of effect, but it also has a long-term effect. It also has this effect in the long term of training the awareness to fold in on its own nature, right? Because the softness that you feel, if you feel some softness there, some sweetness of your own love, it travels through the body, it travels up through the the meridians of the arms and down the arms and out the palms of the hand and back in where it started. So it's like it feeds its own source. And that is a very powerful thing to do when you want to heal, because that softness that is produced in the middle of the chest is the foundation for the healing process. The compassion, mercy, forgiveness, recognition, love. These values form the foundation for activating the healing function in the body. The healing function is essentially an integrative function. But even more than that, in this particular webinar on the immune system, oh my gosh, it goes directly to the thymus. It goes directly to that organ in the middle of the chest, right there, that's responsible for maintaining the health of the body. So it functions in two ways. One, I think I mentioned in the advertisement for this webinar, is that the immune system is like the military branch of the physiology, right? Its job is to seek out any kind of invasive energies, viruses, bacteria, mold, fungus, any kind of toxins in the body, anything you might ingest. If you ingest some plastic or something, you know, the body will create a little mucousy coating around that and just to help it pass through without getting lodged between layers of tissue or something. You know, we want to keep the body clear. So the immune system has that function. But another function, when I was exploring the immune, obviously I explore the topics before I come to you, is the value of memory. The immune system has, as part of its makeup, as part of its cavalry, as part of its army, are cells that specifically, whose job specifically is to remember. They're like archives. They're like archival cells. And that has to do with the way the immune system deals with invasive life forms. We want to call them life forms, viruses, bacterias, molds, and funguses, other toxins like that, is that the immune system takes a read, particularly viruses, it takes a reading on the DNA that's in the virus. And I don't know if viruses are technically categorized. Again, I'm not a doctor. I don't think they're technically categorized as life forms, because they're like, I think a life form has to be able to do certain things. It has to like seek food and reproduce and do certain types of things. And I'm not sure that a virus fits all of the categories for the life form, but that's, you know, in a sense, that's neither here nor there right now, because that's at more of a superficial technical level, and what we're looking at is the fundamental energetic level. For example, I don't know how many of you are followers of Dr. Michael Levine. Do you know this guy? He's a computer scientist. I think he's a programmer, but he's been working with biotechnologies for like nanotechnologies for computers. And one of the things that, yeah, he's come up with some brilliant stuff. And I've sent, for some of you who've been in my webinars for a while, I've sent links to his videos, by the way, that TED Talk of him. We are in our family affectionately called the frog video, where he talks about the epigenome and how controlling and manipulating the epigenome allows scientists to create animals with all sorts of characteristics that are outside the norm, like 5 arms and an eyeball growing off their neck. I mean, scientists do the nastiest things to animals, but anyway, the point is that one of the things that he did, if any of you saw the recent interview between Dr. Tony Nader and Dr. Michael Levine, which I saw and I do recommend. It's a lovely interview where they really dive into the consciousness of the whole thing. Dr. Michael Levine talks about how they grafted a few skin cells off of a frog, and the skin cells of the frog have like some mucus membranes material and some hairs. Like that's all. Just maybe he even said they took them off of baby frogs. I can't remember, but they're just a little bit this, and they make themselves into they put them in a petri dish. And what happens is the little cells kind of find each other and they kind of band together and they make a little nodule, of skin cells. And even though the hair cells are normally perform the function of hair cells, what they do in these little nodules of skin cells is the hair cells take on a different job and they start to act like little flippers or fins, and they let the little nodule of skin move around at will. Now, this thing doesn't have these things. These things, he had a name for them, I can't remember, but they don't have a nervous system. They don't have senses of perception, right? Except for probably sense of touch, right? A little bit, but like no nervous system to process the sense of touch. They're just little globs of skin cells. But guess what? They reproduce. They can run through mazes without touching the walls. They use their little hairs as little flippers and they kind of like navigate their way around in their environment. They reproduce, you guys. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Amazing. Maybe believable, but amazing. Like mind-blowing to the scientists who discovered all this. So the point is that we can say that viruses are not living things because they don't technically fit in the category of living cells like that. The fact is viruses act with a tremendous amount of intelligence. Here we are, right, the smart beings of our world, and viruses can mess us up big time. A virus can come in and really, mess with you. So not to be underestimated, those viruses, which brings me back to the point about memory, that the immune system's one of its jobs. Thank you, my husband, for that question. One of the immune system's jobs is to tie the moments of this life together, to integrate the moments of the human life. This was the investigation that went along with this particular webinar, was that falling ill is not a coincidence. It happens at a very specific time and place, at a very specific moment within the lifespan. A lot of people, I know a lot of us had various illnesses as children, right? It's really common for children to get, especially once you start going to school and you're exposed to so many other little children, and viruses just get passed from child to child. And as I mentioned before, illnesses rise up in the physiology to mark the area of consciousness and the area of one's own self that requires evolution at this time or at any given time. It's like the area of your own consciousness that has the most potential to integrate your divine source self. At that moment, that's the area, that area of consciousness has a correlative representation in the physical body. Some part of the physical body represents each of the different parts of the field of consciousness, or we could say each of the different phases on the cycle of the journey of the hero to meet his eventual goal of rising up in his nature and becoming an expression of his full potential. He's her, their full potential. So timing is one of the considerations of falling ill. And when the body fights off a virus, the cells, the archival cells in the immune system that are responsible for holding on to the DNA, the record of the DNA of that virus, they hold on to more information than just the DNA. And this is only, I mean, I don't even know if there's any scientific research on this at all, but I do know that this is my experience. This is my experience, is that that the physiology seems to remember the times that I was fighting off various viruses. And these times, they follow a specific pattern of behavior. And that pattern of behavior is, I'm dealing with something that is difficult and I prevail. As long as you're alive, as long as you're here, it means you prevailed. So that ability to face off with some negativity or some dark energy or some problem, and then to prevail, to come out victorious, that process is the hero's journey in a nutshell. And it's a very, children especially tend to get a lot of viruses, as I mentioned before. And it's interesting because children tend to feel vulnerable in this world and under-resourced, and often have not fully integrated the evolutionary issue of going into a problem, like approaching a problem by leaning into it rather than escaping. When people are little, it's just a very like a gut reaction. And also I would say conditioning passed down from the ancestry that, oh, it's a problem. Well, maybe I can just avoid it. Maybe I can just like, don't go there. But that's not the way the immune system works. The immune system, above all else, is the part of our body that does not run away. And of course, with the hero's journey, this is the area, the hero's journey starts up in the head area and it works its way in. And this is the point in the journey where the hero realizes, I'm going to have to lean into this journey. I'm going to have to really embrace the journey. Even though I don't know how, I'm going to eventually face off with this darkness that's at the end of my path. It's before the hero has received the tool, right? There's always a point on the hero's journey where the hero meets up with some wise person or somebody who gives them a magic object or a weapon or something that they will eventually use to deal. And that all happens in the digestive area of the body, right? All those enzymes and hormones and chemicals that are used to break down and break the food into smaller and smaller pieces. Those are the tools. But before that, up in this area, in the esophagus area, and of course the thymus, the hero just has to go, dang, I've got to like go there and do that. And I don't, so a lot of, it's like a faith. There's an element of faith in there. But for the immune system, it's not about faith. The immune system's functions sort of sits at a deeper level than the whole body function. And so the immune system is basing its function on is sort of algorithmic, we could say an algorithmic approach to dealing with problems. It's got its little army of immune system cells. So I'm being asked to do a healing by my dear husband. So let's just dive. And of course, usually what I do is I lay out all the theory on Friday and then we do more healings on Saturday, but I think it would be nice to do some healing for the immune system and also for the value or the function of memory. I like this. When this thing came up, I thought to myself, oh, I'd really like to see what memory does, and with the exploration of memory and how deeper understanding and knowledge of that unfolds with all of you, because your light is so bright and it's so much appreciated to unfurl some of the deeper details. But let's just see. We'll just see what the source of creation wants to do. So from the source of creation, discernment or discrimination is rising up as the main issue. And this is important because discrimination stands in the doorway between the immune system serving the body in a really powerful way or damaging the body, right? Because autoimmune issues are a byproduct of the immune system becoming overly zealous and creating inflammation inappropriately. Definitely bringing us to another facet of the immune system function, which is how do we deal with anger? Vedic philosophy says that anger is the great enemy of mankind. And with all deepest respect for Vedic philosophy, I would say under normal circumstances, that's the case. It's not an easy thing to deal with. But for those who are on the evolutionary journey, no stone should be left unturned. What can a person accomplish if they haven't faced off with their own anger and learned how to handle it effectively? Right? If a person has done that, if a person has some familiarity with the way anger shows up for them and has learned to leverage that energy for the sake of evolution, then anger stops being an enemy and becomes a useful tool. I'm just feeling the web of life and how at this time in history, especially here in the West, you guys, we'll have the Europeans with us tomorrow, but for tonight, here in the West, it seems as if there has that the anger that resides at a collective level of our world seems to be a bit on the rise. So we are not only dealing with our own anger, we are dealing with our own anger in the context of a field of emotional lack of integration of that anger. When you integrate your own experience and your own understanding of anger, then you work with it, you use it to help set healthy boundaries, to help define your world in a way that supports everyone's highest and best evolution. But when it's not integrated, in fact, worse, when people are dealing with denial, right? People are like, oh, no, I'm not angry. I don't have an issue with that, when they actually do. Then it comes out in ways that can be passive aggressive or really difficult to deal with. So some patterning that's in the collective field. And part of the reason it's coming up like that is because in the world we live in right now, only some fraction of individuals are actually interested enough in their own spiritual evolution and approaching it in a way that's effective enough that they're dealing and they have been dealing with, and they know how to deal with their anger. And the vast majority of individuals aren't anywhere close to that. So it means that anybody who's on top of it, who's on top of those darker feelings, must act like a lighthouse in the dark. They must act like a beacon in the darkness for those who have not yet come to that point of understanding or realization about themselves. Why are we doing this? Rhetorical question. Why are we doing this healing session? Why are we doing this healing, this particular healing for the immune system? We thought it was like the immune system as in my immune system inside my little body. And why are we talking about the collective? Because all the systems of our body have have laws of nature that oversee them, the laws of nature that are responsible for the system's growth and health, well-being, and evolution. Those laws of nature are system laws of nature. And so when we're dealing with systems, we're always dealing with both collective and individual aspects of our world. And one of the clearings that's happening right now is, I'm looking for, it's partly in the astral body, astral, emotional, mental levels of the physiology, but this clearing is focusing on supporting integration between yourself as an individual and yourself as collective. Because we're individuals and we are also the collective. One of the examples that came up this last week or so was that you can imagine like I'm this tooth and you're this tooth over here or something. But the teeth, they share the liver, they share the brain, they share the eyes, right? They share they share the hands, all the other parts of the body are shared, even though the one tooth says, well, I'm separate from this other tooth over here. So I feel like I'm separate. But because they share all the other parts of the body, they all share the tongue, right? Because that shared element is there, it allows the teeth to realize, oh, I'm really an integral part of this larger system. And without my one tongue that's being shared by all of my teeth here, then I'm not really able to perform my function effectively. They share the space of the mouth together. Well, we share Venus and the sun and Saturn. We share the planets, we share the stars, we share the air that we breathe. We share this big world, this big universe. And the sharing allows us to transcend or step past that idea of being very individual. And it also gives us access to resources that are not available on an individual level. And for healing a system like the immune system, and for healing this issue around the immune system, which is the sort of discriminative handling of anger, right? Because in a sense, that's the tool of the immune system. It has a kind of hot quality to it, that the particular cells are these cells that go around and like literally kill and eat and destroy, bacterias and viruses and stuff. I mean, this isn't, this isn't some mamby-pamby thing. Like, this is like the real thing. It's like when you watch the National Geographic video of the lion out in the wild and he chases down a gazelle and he like rips it limb from limb, and it's like, well, like that's like the real thing that's happening. So this is what our immune systems do, right? But they do it with some discrimination, because you don't want the immune system doing that to your good healthy cells, right? Anyway. Cosmic resources, universal information, this vast access to this level of oneself, opening up that channel. And this channel is opening up primarily in the astral body, and absolutely for ancestors, because there's quite a lot of conditioning that we've carried from our ancestors down into the present time, that tells us that we're separate, and that big universe out there, that's really not part of me, right? That's just some big thing that's out there separate from me. Trust rises. Trust rises from the center of the chest area, like a light medicine. So often, the energy that's required to heal something ends up being produced by that part of the consciousness. So the light medicine is produced in that area and then it folds into its own structure. So it's like a self-healing process that takes place. And trust Trust is built on a foundation of access to fundamental truth, universal truth, absolute truth. And that access is directly experiential. It's not intellectual, it's completely experiential. Truth has a feel to it. You know, like when somebody says something and you're like, oh, yes, that's so right. You say, oh, yes, that's so right, because you feel it is so right. You feel it. You feel it. There's a feeling. There's an energy signature in absolute truth. It's clear. It's clear. It's concise. It's nourishing. It's nourishing to the soul. It brings truth, like absolute truth, brings a quality of resolution with it, resolve, right? It has this way when absolute truth shows up, it has this way of sort of completing what uncertainty or whatever doubt was sitting in the system. When absolute truth comes up and says, boom, this would be the truth. It's like, okay, thank you. Thank you. Good to know that. Now I have a rock I can stand on, something like that. So that quality, and I can see how that quality of absolute truth, of solid truth, goes along with the ability to persevere and to overcome challenges, right? Because the absolute truth provides such a nice foundation that even in the face of possible disaster or failure, conditions are created that allow you to prevail. So this is the energy that's starting to gel and integrate and stabilize here in the thymus area of the body. And of course, on the hero's journey, the hero begins like a you can imagine an apple. The digestive tract kind of follows this path, right? So the apple that says, I'm going to be an apple tree tomorrow, make baby apples. No, I'm going to eat you. So then it starts to break down the structure of the apple, and the apple realizes, oh, I'm not going to be an apple tree tomorrow. And something else is going to happen, but I don't know what. So lots of sensitivity is here, lots of awareness in the mouth, and it comes in, and starting around the point of the thyroid, we start to come into particular energies. This whole chest area is oriented toward the integration of the individual with the universal. So this is the period during the hero's journey where he travels about and he gathers up and accrues resources, but also gains wisdom. There's definitely a wisdom gathering period early on in the hero's journey, and that's all that takes place up here in the chest area. The respiratory system, obviously, is a kind of Reader's Digest version, a very sort of encapsulated version of the infinite becoming individualized and then returning back to the infinite changed and evolved, right? It comes in, it nourishes and supports our own evolution as an individual, and then it collects up all the byproducts of the physiology that can be collected through the respiratory system, and it gives them all back, and as a result, the air has been changed. The air moves towards its eventual goal, which is full recognition and understanding of its own nature. But yeah, it changes. I'm just looking at the air element as it relates to the immune system. I kind of think of the immune system as more of a watery element, right? Because the immune system cells, they reside in the plasma of the blood, and they travel around the body through the sort of plasma area of the body. But movement itself in the body is more of an air function. It's more of a function of air than it is of water. Although water is flowy, water does flow, but air is the main responsible primal element for movement. I'm just asking being, how does the air element? Yeah, so the air is one of the ways that we gather up invaders from our environment, right? A lot of viruses are passed through the air. Viruses and bacteria can do that. And mold, plenty. Mold goes through the air plenty. So this part of our session is a healing for our relationship with the air. And feeling tingling all over the skin. The sense of touch is associated with the element air. And the skin and the sense of touch are related to how we as individuals interface with our world, with the collective level of our world. And I'm definitely feeling compassion rising in the chest area. And with that compassion, there's a recognition of your sweetness and goodness as a person, your fundamental desire to do action in this world that brings benefit, and how important that is, meaningful, how important and meaningful that is. And how the air has been feeling like it was full of gunk. It was a mess. There's so much. The air is so compact with life force. Energetically, I'm seeing the air filled with life force, filled with the presence of zillions of angels and demons, zillions of forms of life, the good and the bad. Zillions like an ocean. All the air beings, all the beings. And how the skin speaks to the air through the chemicals our skin breathes, and the skin emits various neurochemicals into the air that speak to the air and speak to the chemistry of the air and tell the world around you how you are doing. And that has the potential to attract or repel invaders. So what do we need to do inside to help the body produce the type of neurochemistry that speaks to the air and supports the attraction of the most life-supporting elements that the air has to give the body? So it's like a copacetic relationship between the body and the air. And one of the first things, this is very valuable, is this confidence that comes with when you feel confident. All the feelings that we have, right, translate into neurochemistry. So when you feel confident, that whatever darkness arises, whatever problem shows up at your door, that you are prepared to take responsibility for that, personal responsibility, and cultivate a response that allows you to leverage that experience for the sake of everyone's highest evolution, everyone without exception. Discrimination, sensitive, and discrimination and discernment, right? They're related to timing. So timing is a very sort of important factor in this process, because the cycle of evolution is constantly rolling and unfolding and giving rise to this manifest creation. And different laws of nature dominate at different points in the cycle of the hero's journey or in the cycle of evolution. And the specific response or behavior that you bring forth will be a byproduct of the specific laws of nature that are dominating at any given moment and what's required of you, like how would you interact with them? And again, that's very much related to how the skin interacts with the air around it, right? It's a constant, and the skin is so big too, like the air up here might be telling me something different from the air down here. We don't know, in my feet. So it's the calculations on it are so complex that it would overwhelm the intellect. It would overwhelm the mind to try to discern exactly each little calculation at each moment. However, the beauty of the hero's journey being archetypal is that there's a pattern there that's simple and allows us, once you understand the story of how the divine, the one eternal divine source, shows up as the many, and then as the many, it finds it interacts with its own nature. It interacts in such a way that its own evolution is served, and it returns home. Great. It's really kind of a simple story, actually. So it's not necessary to decipher out every little detail. It's just enough to understand the landscape of that story well enough that whatever shows up can be at least placed, especially if something specific shows up, like the anger issue. Like that's one of the gifts that the hero receives, you know, as the hero starts here. And he's like, oh, dang, I'm not going to become the king tomorrow and marry the princess. I'm going to go on some other journey. I don't know what. And then it gets to the thyroid, and the thyroid's like, look, my job is to look ahead and tell you what's coming up. So there's like that meeting with the, you know, with the seer, essentially, and that moment where the hero realizes, oh gosh, I'm going to go on this journey. And then in the next phase of the journey, the hero starts to accrue resources and redefine himself or him or herself in order to be prepared to face off with this big challenge. The accruing of resources phase. I'm seeing how the immune system goes through all the different steps of the hero's journey in order to perform its function. But where is the discrimination? I would like that. If tonight's webinar brings anything to all of us, I would love if that was that finer, more discrete level of understanding of specifically what do I need to do at each point in order to produce the best possible effect for my health. And for some people, the first thing is is there is a kind of a gut reaction of being hard on myself when I notice I've made a mistake. Right? Because the hero can say, well, I thought I was going to become the king tomorrow, but I guess I'm not. So now I'm out on this journey. Well, what the heck am I? Well, I guess I'm a failure as a king. Right? Like that's such a common thing that people, there's kind of like a tendency to fall back into self-deprecation. And I think one of the reasons for that is because we live in a society that tends to judge individuals. There's a lot of judgment that goes down. And as I was mentioning before, for those of you who are with me now, you're here because you've already mastered some of these lessons, but there's so many people who haven't. And so it's kind of a dog eat dog world. It's kind of a rough thing. Especially if you're in the public eye and you show up a little bit off your kilter or whatever, then that can, lead to all kinds of trolling and challenges. So that patterning of, oh, you had a moment of messing up. Well, here, let me tell you what a rotten person you are. That patterning is there partly as a self-patterning, as a means of defense or self-protection. It's a defense, right? So it's in the immune system. There's a pattern there in the immune system of, well, I can defend myself if I'm hard enough on myself, then the next guy won't be hard on me, because it's like, I'm already being hard on myself. So you don't need to tell me I screwed up. You don't need to tell me like how much of a big mistake I made, because like I'm already telling myself that and I'm already trying to fix it. Thank you very much. Right? Just to kind of avoid all that drama, to avoid the drama. It must be handled internally with much discrimination. Those mistakes are the instruments for our growth, right? They are the opportunities to make changes and to refine our approach to reality. So that little pattern, it's like a little vicious cycle, a little habit of being very judgmental on oneself and very harsh on oneself. It doesn't help or support the evolutionary process. Recognizing the negativity, absolutely. You need to see what happened. You need to see what you did wrong. You need to see the mistake and figure out how to handle it. But I'm a bad person because I made a mistake? And I'm saying it from, right? It seems kind of like a no-brainer in a way. But remember, you guys, we're doing this not just for the superficial, conscious thinking mind level of ourself. This healing is going in through the astral body to the web of life, to the ancestors, right? It's going in so that the patterning, because how many generations has that been going on, right? It could be like a lot of generations. So the patterning is being addressed so that the fundamental neurochemistry that underlies the experience of, oh, I blew it. Oh, that looks like I blew it right there. I made a mistake, is handled in such a way, that's part of one of our darknesses, right? It's handled in such a way that it's just simply leveraged as a tool for evolution, period. Without all the trappings, without all the drama. And I could give you a laundry list. Oh, we're clearing drama and we're clearing self-sabotage and we're clearing, pain bodies and all kinds of beliefs and all kinds of things. But the important point without the laundry list is that the astral body is adjusting. The astral body is shifting around a little bit to find that sweet spot that allows you to look at your shortcomings, weaknesses, failings, and flaws and embrace them as an opportunity for evolution to whatever degree. And how we define a flaw, and also realizing that however we show up at the surface is really an expression of divine being showing up through us as us. So to whatever degree of harshness or high expectations we might have on ourselves, we have to realize that that's also what shows up is what had the support of the whole universe behind it to show up. Anything could show up. Anything could have or can show up at any time. But what shows up, it's only a tiny, tiny fraction of the potential of this world actually shows up. What shows up is what was meant to show up. Okay, let's look at some questions here. I'm like down to 4 minutes. Bitten by mosquitoes and spiders a week ago. Very itchy. Bites faded, resembling pimples. Oof. Then last night I was bitten again around my neck. Oh my gosh, this bite swelled up to nickel coin. Oof, diameter, more itchy. Ooh, how to calm this reaction. Oh, this is reflection of having difficulty dealing with the low level of consciousness in the environment and feeling kind of victimized or hurt by the low consciousness in the environment. And again, this is a really good example that from the outside, you can do so, like if you're getting bitten by mosquitoes and spiders, obviously, the thing to do is to go through your house and fill in the cracks and usher all the biting insects out. But the effectiveness of that activity, the power and the ability to actually get them out is based on inner healthy boundaries. You need to use a little bit of that anger energy. You need to use a little bit of it to set a solid boundary, because we're living in the soup of the collective consciousness and there's literally nothing we can do about it. So we have to deal with the collective consciousness on that level. And we have to, there's a lot of influences now. With the compassion of a mother, looking at the suffering that's in the collective consciousness, suffering brought about by people's inability to deal with their own anger. And then it just bubbles and rises to the surface, often in forms that allow that individual to blame somebody else for the anger that they're experiencing. So with compassion, we're just looking to the junction, and the skin is the junction, right, between the individual self and the environment. And there is an overseeing intelligence for the insects and the arachnids, right? The spiders or arachnids. That overseeing intelligence is like a kind of deva in its own nature. And there is a level of your intelligence that speaks to that level of nature's intelligence. And that level of your intelligence is from your collective cosmic self. So just bringing the awareness down subtle to the level of the causal body, causal and astral, because when we're dealing with the relationship between the intelligence of the bugs and the intelligence of your own being. There's also some connection like meridians, right, that run out through the web of life that connect you to that intelligence. And that intelligence is being so sharp and so harsh with you. And like, here's this sweet person who's absolutely dedicated their whole entire life to helping the world on every level. And what is that harshness that comes? She, that harshness, has a feminine form. She comes as a kind of a instigator of karma, that in your causal body, in yourself, there's a piece of of darkness that hadn't been completely handled. And it's quite a sort of feisty, malevolent type of energy there. And that energy hasn't been fully integrated. And so as focusing our attention, we focus in on that energy and support its integration. And of course, once it starts integrating, all of a sudden its divine form starts rising to the surface, and we see, oh yes, well, it's like it's like those fierce goddesses, right? It's a fierce goddess energy. And there's also another value in it. It reminds me a little bit of the yoginis, right? The 64 yoginis of Durga that their nature is to go in and pluck out or identify very specific types of darkness. Actually, Tom, can you make a note to send the names of the 64 yoginis to everyone? I have a beautiful recording of it by a Vedic scholar. It's just really beautiful. They were, the story being that the Indra was in battle with some kind of demonic form and destroyed the demonic form in such a way that its body just splattered in all directions. And the 64 yoginis were pulled in. They were requested to come to peel out the little bits of the darkness of the body of the demolished demon and to pull it off of the beautiful mountain and the beautiful landscape, to collect it so that that body could go to its eternal resting place, to its appropriate resting place, and not be scattered about. There's a lot of discrimination right there. Increasing that discrimination of that energy. I think that particular energy in the collective field has been very misplaced, very demonized. So this also is a healing for the collective field. For that bug energy, all those bugs, they had the freedom, or they were able to exploit the potential to come in and bite you because they have been so misunderstood. That overseeing deity for those forms of creation, badly misunderstood. So understanding, of course, recognition. The human awareness has the ability to form neural connections between divine grace and this material world. The spiders and the mosquitoes don't. They're doing their thing. But when we look to the feminine overseeing intelligence of these forms, and in our own awareness can make the connection between the beauty and the dignity and the greatness of divine grace, the divine feminine form, and those forms, those little bodies, those little sharp biter bodies, that we make the connection there and nurture that connection like a mom, nurture the connection, then that deity takes a turn in the direction of its evolution. It's blessed. Remember earlier I said that the divine is evolving and that as humans we're playing a part in that process. So this is the part. This is what we do. We see things in the way other beings and other creatures don't see them. We can follow forms from the surface of creation down, down, down into their finer value, into their subtle expression. We can make the connection. And as we do that, we make the connection within ourselves as well. There's a big flow of love. But with that love, like, you have to understand, it is the most loving form of yourself that is responsible, that takes responsibility to set healthy boundaries. The most loving form. Because if we gave that job to some part of ourself that wasn't very loving, then when the healthy boundaries get set, they could get set in a way that could pinch the hearts of the world, or could cause somebody somehow undue or unnecessary pain, even though you've experienced some unnecessary pain. We come back at it in a way that uplifts the whole situation. So it is that loving center, that really, really sweet center, that also takes up the mantle of firmness. And here's a boundary. I love you. I recognize your dignity. I honor you for being the important expression of the divine feminine that you are. And I set myself in a relationship with you of mutual respect. You don't bite me, I won't bite you. Because that's where the anger comes in, right? And the anger, I mean, those bites are like, they're like little spots of anger that it's like you're sacrificing yourself because you didn't want to hurt somebody else's feelings. You know, you didn't want to hurt their feelings. So, but the anger is there because you deserve to be protected and to not be bitten all over. The other side of that story is you took on that toxin. You took those toxins into your body because, and we didn't talk about this tonight at all, but something maybe to cover tomorrow. We learn this, the memory thing was a little bit in there. We learn every single time some difficulties overcome, some difficulties handled. We learn. And maybe the first times that those energies come out or that anger comes out, it doesn't come out very gracefully. Gosh, I know that was how it was for me. Anybody who's been through the dark night of the soul type of experience knows that the dynamics of that experience, that dark night of the soul, is that you have to let the darkest aspects of your own self out to the surface enough that you can learn to handle them with grace. And when they first come out, it's like learning to ride a bike, right? When they first show up, you don't have the skill set. It takes a little bit of time to work with those energies and get used to them and figure out, how do I bring them to the surface so that they don't hurt me and they don't hurt others either. It takes a little bit of doing. And everybody's path is slightly different. You know, in the end result is we all learn to ride a bike, but the process is different for each person because everybody's center balance is slightly different and everybody's musculoskeletal structure is slightly different. And so like that. So nobody can do it for you. You have to do it yourself. But doing so is a very important step on the path to creating, supporting, and maintaining a healthy immune system. Because the immune system functions on that, it leverages that particular function, that setting healthy boundary function. Thank you for the great question. More amazing questions came in, and luckily, to my husband who's helping me, please, can we make sure that we have a copy of these questions? Because I will, as usual, start tomorrow with questions. I also have some email questions, so it will be good for everybody's questions to get answered. Thank you, everyone, for being with me tonight. It's been really amazing. Oh, I'm so grateful to you. Yes. Thank you for being here. It's been really, really interesting and really fun, very interesting exploration into the immune system. And we will do more. We will do more tomorrow, and I'm sure go into some of the other areas of the immune system that we didn't cover today. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here with all of you. And for those of you who are not signed up for tomorrow, don't worry. Everybody gets recordings of both sessions, and we'll have our dear Europeans with us tomorrow. It should be a joy and a pleasure. And yeah, I look forward to seeing you all very soon. Thank you. Have a good night.